Hi.
Hey.
Hi. I'm currently reading the poorly translated instructions for my new iPhone XR case.
Why do you need instructions for a phone case?
Well, okay. I'm just going to read you the title of the little card that was in the box. It's in a situation where there is a stain, which, if I had to pick a title for my memoirs, they give you a little cleaning cloth. I ended up going to, so I'm in day 4 of the 2-phone life. When we last left our hero, I had picked up an iPhone XR as a second line. The hardware is really, really good. It's just really, really hard to hold on to when you're using, and it's very slippery. I can't tell what the back is made of. I think it's got glass on the back, and it just has a habit. It just has a habit of falling out of my hands when I'm using it. So as one does, I went over to my good friend Google, and I typed in wire cutter best iPhone XR case and used that as a starting point. And one of the cases that was on their list was a Spigen or Spigen, or I don't know how you say this, liquid crystal case. And it is it is some sort of TPU plastic. It's definitely very grippy compared to the glass of the phone. It's clear. It's already showing a lot of smudges, but then again, the phone being glass on the back showed a lot of smudges. But I got it clear because I wanted to show off the color of the iPhone, because I think the blue is a really good looking color.
Right.
And and it came with this little card that tells you how to clean your phone, and they also give you a little lens cleaning wipe.
Ooh, that's high quality phone case.
There's a lot of glyphs on this thing that I don't know, and I think it's Korean. But I'll have to take a picture for show notes. In a situation where there is a stain, that's the title of that little card. So very, 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 very helpful. I'm liking it so far. The iPhone XR, the battery life so far is pretty good. I haven't had to charge it yet. Now, admittedly, I don't use this as much as my personal phone. I don't have near the apps installed on it yet. I just have some like official kind of work related apps. And now I have made several phone calls on it already. And it's held up really, really well. So thumbs up to the iPhone XR so far. We may have to make this a running segment. We may have to make this a running segment on my cell phone conundrum. But so far, so good.
Good. Did you get your issue with AT&T figured out?
No, that hasn't been resolved yet. Only because I'm not in a place where we can upgrade my wife's phone just yet.
Got it.
And so whenever she is in a place where she's ready to do that, which is going to require us taking a backup because I don't use iCloud storage, we're going to have to get that backed up so she doesn't lose anything. She's admittedly not thrilled about it because she doesn't like having to retype in all her passwords and everything. I'm hoping that her keychain comes over and it should be a non-issue.
Yeah, if you're not using iCloud, if you do an encrypted backup in iTunes, your passwords will stay.
Okay, and that's what I assumed. Yeah, we just have to try that out. And right. She's going to have to get used to not using Touch ID and using Face ID. But otherwise, I think she'll be happier with it. Her phone's kind of old, and I think she'll appreciate it. And she has the big boy. She has the Plus.
Right.
So I think she'll appreciate going back down to a smaller phone.
Yeah, I think my wife is looking at like the iPhone, well, whatever the next one is, in the max size, the gigantic phone. She's in the Plus Club as well, and at some point, she's holding on to her physical button. Well, the button it has, kind of irrationally. I think she does not want to give it up or do Face ID. So her next phone's going to be probably very difficult for her to get to enjoy, but we'll see.
Yeah. Now, is she a Plus user by choice? Because my wife wasn't. Yes. It was just a hand-me-down.
Nope. She likes the big phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, to each their own. I just didn't like carrying around that big. I mean, I liked it at first, but I was happy to go back to the 10 when it came out.
I feel the same way. I had the 6 Plus, and it was good. I liked the bigger screen more than I thought I would, but I was happy to go back to the smaller case size.
Yeah. If I want a big screen, there's always the iPad, right?
That's true.
Man, we're really tackling the tough issues on this podcast.
Phone sizes and cases, yeah.
Yeah, so big news at the start of this podcast. I didn't have any follow-up from last time. I didn't get yelled at for anything this time.
Me either.
Okay, so I think we can make that a good thing. But
yes,
as of officially this episode, which is episode 3, we're official, right? We are.
Yes.
We're Facebook official, right?
In a relationship.
Yeah, we are. We're in a relationship with various podcasting things. So we made the announcement on the Twitters.
We did.
Overall, people seem to enjoy it so far. I don't have the ability to see statistics, and I don't know if you've taken a peek at them either to see if we've had a spike.
You know what? I mean, you can call it a spike. It's still not big numbers, but hold on, let me pull them up here. Yeah. Well, Spotify updates their stats whenever they want, so they're a little behind. But as far as the main RSS feed, we're almost at 50 unique downloads. So
wow,
yeah,
wow.
I mean,
there are 50 people who willingly downloaded this podcast.
Yeah, and all the feedback I've gotten so far has been really positive.
Yeah.
I would like to make a note that right now the show notes in Spotify look like hot garbage. Spotify just goes, HTML formatting, what is that? We'll just make it one big paragraph. I don't think I have a way to control that with what I'm using right now, but I'm going to look into it, and I'm going to figure out how to get our site secured, a good SSL cert, which I think will involve me emailing the fine people at Libsyn to get that figured out, but Yeah. Little technical note there.
Yeah. I as soon as I saw it was an HTTPS secured, I knew there were going to be a lot of angry nerds that would probably at me about it. Your site is an HTTPS.
Turns out.
And I would say it's not my site, it's Paul's site. I would just blame you.
Yeah, it is my fault. What I'm using to kind of host the podcast gives me a lot of shortcuts, but I don't have a lot of control.
It's fine. It's fine. We're not. Nobody is stealing anybody's personal information. It's fine.
I know, but as somebody who does that for a living, I just kind of feel bad.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice not to worry about it for once?
You know what? It might be. Maybe I'm going to leave it. You know what? I'm going to leave it for a bit. Yeah.
You know what?
Done.
You don't let society tell you how to handle your certificates. Don't do that.
Stick it to the man.
Yeah. So,
but thanks to everybody who's reached out on Twitter and said they're subscribed and liked the podcast so far. So thanks a bunch. We appreciate you.
Is there? Yeah. No, totally. I know a lot of people that follow me have downloaded it and given it a listen, which is cool. Well, have you gotten any immediate feedback in people in your kind of immediate spheres of influence?
Yeah, just most people that come up and said, "Hey, I downloaded the first episode. I'm listening to it," or "I've enjoyed it." Yeah, so all good feedback so far. People seem to be excited. So,
yeah. This is how these things start.
Yeah. So I'll do that.
Swell.
Yeah, I'll do that typical podcast thing. If you like it, tell your friends. Rate us on iTunes. Give us that sweet 5 stars.
Yeah. Use your face and mash that like and subscribe button.
That's right.
Oh, boy. All right, so here we go. We've already hit one topic, but I think it's worth reminding everybody that we do this podcast for fun. Opinions expressed here are solely mine and yours and nobody else's. So I just like to say that up front. I think I'm required to say that.
Yeah.
Man, we have... our doc is getting bigger, not smaller. So
yeah, you added quite a bit of content here, so I'm excited.
I have thoughts, and I've got a doozy. So I don't want to I felt like I dominated last podcast with my thoughts and stories.
No. If you have a doozy, I'm excited. Let's do it.
All right, I want to talk about Chernobyl on HBO.
Oh, okay. I have not seen this yet, but it's on my list of things to watch. So,
all right. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! The reactor explodes. Okay.
I heard. Yeah.
I think I may have mentioned last podcast that the study of the nuclear power industry has been something that's fascinated me ever since I was young. I remember that I was of a certain age when the Chernobyl disaster happened, and as far as my reading habits go, I have a bookshelf in my basement that's stocked with basically one of three types of books. There are books on World War I, there are books on the Cold War and different stories of the Cold War, and there are books on Chernobyl. I have read a lot about the Chernobyl accident and all the things that have led up to it and all the things that have come after it. I have watched a lot of documentaries, and I have read a lot about it, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am a nuclear power expert, but I will say that I have read many of the stories that have come out of the accident, what has led up to it, what has caused it. And in a previous life, when I was working at a company, we had to go through human factors training. And when you go through human factors training, there are different accidents that you kind of study. So going through and learning about how human factors contribute to rates of failure and how things break down, you study basically three major, I guess you want to call them industries, and that is air travel, space flight, and the nuclear power industry. Because a lot of times, and Chernobyl kind of being a weird exception here, is that when there are these large-scale industrial accidents or airline accidents or space accidents, it usually isn't a single catastrophic issue. Usually it's somebody forgot to put a bolt in somewhere, or somebody took a shortcut on a maintenance checklist, and then that has a waterfall downstream kind of thing. And the human factors kind of come in where people were afraid to speak up, or they're talked down, like in the Challenger disaster. And you know, we've had to do a lot of study of that, to basically how do you deal with that kind of human factor in these things. And like I said, Chernobyl is a little bit of an outlier because there were inherent flaws in the design of the reactor that was involved in the Chernobyl accident. And a lot of people have kind of theorized that had Chernobyl not happened at Chernobyl, it would have happened somewhere else in the Soviet Union with this type of reactor because of the flaws that were in it.
So they had multiple reactors designed the same way?
Yeah, so the villain of the Chernobyl story is what's called the RBMK 1000 reactor, which was a kind of an aped design off of a reactor designed to produce fuel and fissionable products for the Soviet nuclear weapons program.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating about it is they basically took that reactor, and in typical kind of Soviet style, instead of making it more efficient, they just made it bigger. And
nice, more power.
And one thing that a lot of people, if there's a lot of things that make you go, huh, about the Chernobyl accident. And one of the ones that really kind of catches people off guard is that while all this is going on at Chernobyl, and there's fire and radiation and all sorts of terribleness, there were 3 other nuclear reactors at the facility, and they were still running. Like,
wow.
Nobody, yeah, they eventually did shut them down to get the people out of there. But after they sort of contained the fire and contained the radionuclides that were being emitted from reactor 4, they basically opened up reactors 1, 2, and 3, and people still worked there up until fairly recently, until they were fully decommissioned. I think they actually, I need to check that. They may actually still be running. But people actually would go back there and work in those reactors, even though all this terribleness was going on. But I digress. So suffice to say, I've read a lot of these stories. I've read a lot about the history behind it. And again, I'm not a nuclear physicist, so I can't tell you why things were happening the way they happened inside that reactor, other than what I've read in these books. But I just got done watching the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO, and I don't subscribe to HBO, but this topic interests me so much that I actually signed up for the free trial of HBO Go to watch this series.
Wow.
And I gotta say, it was very, very well done. They definitely dramatized the Chernobyl accident and did stay relatively true to things like timelines and technical details. The main kind of heroes of the story, Valery Legasov, sorry, and Boris Sherbina, who are kind of the two people most directly responsible for kind of containing and handling the emergency. They did a really good job kind of romanticizing them and promoting them as kind of the heroes of, making this go away or be less of an impact. But there are so many names and so many people that were really heroes of that whole thing. I do have complaints about the series. It starts off incredibly strong.
Right.
The first 2.5 hours, which is 2.5 episodes, is amazing. The attention to detail, the storytelling, you're invested from the first 10 minutes of the show. If you haven't seen it, I won't tell you why. And I finished watching it, and when I got done with all 6 episodes, the creator of the show did a 5-episode podcast series where he talked through making the show and the things that were 100% verbatim. We heard these from multiple people. This is what happened, and the stuff that he kind of had to romanticize, because the thing of it is that you only have 5 or however, I think there were 5 episodes, pretty sure, even though I just got done watching it. You only have so many episodes to tell this story, and the time scale throughout the show starts off kind of second by second, the disaster, and then time kind of accelerates at the end once kind of the main problem is dealt with. They kind of fast forward a little bit, and they jump forward quite a bit to get to some key points that happen well after the fact to kind of tell you what happens to these kind of key players. That's the part of the show that I felt was the weakest. They definitely could have gone a little bit deeper onto what they called the liquidation, which was how they actually cleaned up this zone and all the different things they had to do. They touch on it very, very briefly, with the exception of this one particular kind of side story they tell. The entire series is kind of shot from a couple different perspectives. It's shot from kind of, Boris and Valery's kind of point of view. It's also shot from the wife of a firefighter that was involved. It's shot from this fictional researcher that is kind of an amalgamation of different scientists and different people that helped deal with Chernobyl. And then there's also kind of this little side story about this young guy who is basically conscripted to become what will be known as the liquidators. And these people had to do some really, really incredible things. And I got to tell you, if you start watching this show, episode 4 will rip your goddamn heart out.
Really?
Yeah. I tweeted this, and this isn't a joke. It is a form of assault. It's almost abuse what they show you in this episode. It is.
Wow.
This is a tough topic. A lot of people lost their lives in really, really horrible manners. Radiation is something that just totally messes you up.
It's no joke.
It is no joke. And the one thing I don't think people fully understand is that radiation exposure is cumulative. It's not like sunburn, right? Even though sunburn is a type of radiation. If I go outside on a sunny summer day and I get a bad case of sunburn, my skin turns red, and I don't want to go back out in the sun until I develop a tan and my body kind of recovers, and then I can go, be a glutton for more punishment. Radiation doesn't work that way. Radiation is cumulative over your lifespan. So if you're exposed to a very, very high field of radiation, even for a short amount of time, it never goes away. So the limits that get set for people like nuclear plant workers and people who work in hazardous radioactive environments, it's cumulative. Once you kind of hit that number, you can't be there anymore, or you start to get sick. So the really kind of sinister thing about radiation and watching these people get sick in the show is that they're never going to get better. And they do a good job of showing you some of the effects of some of the high fields of radiation that these people were exposed to. Again, I have to give the creators of the show very, very high marks for capturing, by what all accounts are, other than victims of atomic weapons abuse, the only real examples we have of people being exposed to incredibly high fields of radiation. And, in reading the books that I've read about kind of what happens to the human body when you get exposed to that type of radiation, it's sickening to read. The effects artists and the people, they don't aim to gross you out in this show. They do show you some pretty grotesque stuff, but they don't harp on it. Okay. And I thought they did a really good job with that. Like I said, things kind of fall apart for me at the end, because the kind of climax of the show in the final episode is being delivered by kind of the heroes that you come to respect throughout the show. And the reality is that they didn't do those things or say those things. What ultimately happens to them is true, and they do touch on that a little bit. And like I said, they kind of accelerate to get to the end of the story. They don't touch on things like the construction of the sarcophagus around the reactor and things. And I feel like if they had done 8 episodes, they could have done, I think, better justice to some of the other key players that they didn't include in the story, just out of a sake of brevity, right? You only have 5 episodes or whatever, but
right.
But it's an incredibly powerful story. As somebody who was young and alive when this happened, and then I felt like they did a pretty decent job, kind of also showing you how the Soviet Union dealt with stuff like this, because, being a total secrecy kind of state and not willing to admit that there were problems. And
right. They tried to cover it up, right?
Well, they didn't necessarily cover it up. They just didn't admit that it happened, which is an important distinction, right? They call it statecraft. They only kind of fessed up after outside people basically started detecting radiation. They do touch on it in the show. They basically they don't poo-poo it, but they don't do it justice. But basically what happened was, as the cloud of radiation kind of drifted away from Chernobyl and over to Eastern Europe and parts of Scandinavia, other countries started getting these alarms tripping at places, where there were nuclear waste or nuclear power plants. And there's this one story in the book Voices of Chernobyl, and a couple other books too, where there was basically a guy who worked at a nuclear power plant, and he was getting dressed for work, and he hadn't even gone into work yet. And a lot of these places, when you work in places of radiation, you wear a badge that measures your dose, but they also measure you on your way into the plant and the way out of the plant. And hopefully your level of radiation doesn't change all that much in between those two measurements. But this guy came to work, drank a cup of coffee, and before he even went into work, he passed through a radiation detector, and the alarms went off. So they started, measuring him, and he went in and out of it a few times. And I think it was on the 3rd or 4th try he walked through it, nothing happened. So they just thought maybe it was a fluke. So he went to work, he did his thing. He came back later to go on break, and he noticed there was a line of people in the hallway because literally everybody that was coming into the power plant was tripping this alarm. So clearly there was something going on, and they assumed worse. These people
theirs. Yeah.
They thought it was them. So all the bosses there were like, listen, you need to go to the chimney, you need to go to the exhaust, you need to go to the reactor chamber, take all these ratings, because they had, in full disclosure, this particular plant had some problems. So it wasn't outside the realm to think, oh my God, we have a problem at our nuclear power plant. But it turns out that they basically took readings outside the plant, right? And they were seeing radionuclides that were consistent with some sort of nuclear accident, but not necessarily theirs. And around that time, other places in Europe were reporting similar problems. And it was only then that they started calling around to other nations that operated nuclear power plants, like the Soviet Union, saying, hey, did you guys have a problem?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
And at first they were like, no. And then they were like, maybe. They wouldn't say that they wouldn't say that they did have one, but they wouldn't say that they didn't have one. Again, they were very kind of dicey and cagey in their answers.
Right.
But it was only then that they decided to open up a little bit and say, yeah, we have a problem. And oh, by the way, do you know how to put out a burning graphite fire? So that kind of tipped people off that, like, yeah, there was clearly a problem. But, and again, they don't really, they in the show, they handle it a little bit differently. and I don't begrudge this. It's just one of the things they kind of had to condense to get everything into the amount of time that they had, where they find out that there's a problem and how they kind of discover the truth. And then it kind of culminates in the show with figuring out, because one of the selling points of this particular reactor design is it was supposed to be safer. It wasn't supposed to be a problem. But the things that were supposed to save the people in the event of a problem ended up causing the catastrophe.
Really?
Yeah. So I know that you watch HBO.
I do.
Because you watch that show with Game of Kings or whatever the kids are watching these days.
The dragons. Yeah.
With the dragons and the swords and the nudity or whatever. I know you're into that type of stuff, but I highly recommend you give this a watch. I thought they did a really good job. They did a very, very good job with it. It is such an unimaginable human tragedy, and yeah, it was really well done. And if this type of stuff interests you, there are basically, if you want to read more, there are basically 3 books that I can recommend. The first one is more of a picture/diary than it is of like a storytelling, and it was put together by a guy named Igor Kostin. I don't know really how to say his name. I'm probably butchering all of these names, honestly.
Yeah.
And
they're very complicated names.
Yeah, he was one of the first photographers to take pictures of the power plant.
Oh.
And what's interesting is that if you get his book, the name of the book is Chernobyl: Confessions of a Reporter. He takes pictures of the reactor shortly after the accident, I think the next day. And his film was so radioactive that in the pictures he takes, there are white spots that are basically the particles hitting the film as he's trying to shoot it.
Wow.
Yeah, and it has a lot of pictures of the plant, of the workers, of the liquidators. He spent a lot of time there. He actually lived a pretty long and full life, even given the amount of exposure that he had during his time there. This book is out of print. I do have a copy, I think, but I think I loaned it to my dad or somebody. But I know that the Columbus Public Library System has like 4 or 5 copies. Highly recommend you check it out so you can see some of the pictures and kind of what the people that were trying to deal with this problem had to put up with. In IT, sometimes we make jokes about not having the right tools to finish our job. We have absolutely nothing to complain about. Like these guys,
right?
These guys had to basically kind of fabricate, in some cases, their own forms of protection to deal with what they were dealing with, and that's captured pretty good in in Igor's book. So I would say that you probably aren't going to find a copy of this online for less than a couple $100. Kind of this documentary has pushed this book to the forefront a little bit, so used copies
prices go high. Right.
Yep. The other one, and this book was admitted from the creator of the show, kind of talked about this in his podcast, that this was a big inspiration for his show because he did do a lot of research, is the book Voices from Chernobyl. And I'm not going to take a stab at the name of the author. It was originally written in a non-English format, so it has been translated into a couple different languages. It is an oral history of life before, during, and after Chernobyl, from people who lived through it, people who lost loved ones, people who were working there, both at the reactor and as liquidators and as part of the cleanup crew. Some of the stories are absolutely heart-wrenching. Again, some of the stuff that these liquidators had to do and the choices they had to make were very, very difficult. And if it were me, I probably would have just swallowed a gun in some of these cases because it is unimaginable.
Wow.
Right? But, kind of the tragedy and triumph of the Soviet state is that, people typically were pretty patriotic and they would do what they had to do for the state. If somebody asked you to do something, you just kind of did it. And that helped a lot for this catastrophe, but it also created some really awkward stuff. And Voices from Chernobyl really capture that. And then the final book, which is a very, very recent book, and what I consider to be probably the most complete account of the accident, the cleanup, and everything that came after it is a book from Adam Higginbotham called Midnight in Chernobyl. And it is kind of a blow-by-blow, everything that happened, probably the most modern account and retelling of the disaster and the people involved. Very, very expertly written and researched. It came out, I think, earlier this year or late last year. I can't remember exactly, and I'm not going to type and look it up right now. But fantastic book, readily available. If you enjoyed the show, you should read this book, because you will see where the show deviates from history very clearly in this book, just based on the sheer number of players involved. Mm-hmm. But it is very, very well written, very, 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 very well researched, and I can't say enough about it. And, Chernobyl, as terrible as it was, is just kind of one of the crazy stories that emerged from the Soviet Union in the 80s. I also have a lot of books on some of the really crappy stuff that happened to some of the people in the Navy that were dealing with nuclear reactors and nuclear-powered submarines at the time. So you can really, really quickly go down a rabbit hole of Soviet-era nuclear disasters if you keep going down this rabbit hole. But the short version of everything I just said for the past 20 minutes is really, really good show. Really, really enjoyed it. I felt that they could have pushed it a little bit more. But they did a really good job, and I think everybody should watch it, especially if you were alive during that time, and even if you weren't. I think that it is definitely a story worth telling.
Yeah, I don't remember it actually happening when I was a kid. I remember learning about it in school, just and today we're going to talk about Chernobyl, and that was it. But I keep hearing good stuff about the documentary, so I'm going to commit to at least watch a couple episodes before next week.
Yeah, man. Episode 4, just be ready.
Hold on to your butt.
Yeah, hold on to your butt. When you meet Pavel, young Pavel, you'll understand.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm not going to give anything away. If you've seen episode 4 of this show, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, really. And then also, big shout out to the show creator who also did that podcast about it, where he talked about kind of history versus dramatization, and in terms of writing a good story while also remaining kind of true to the source material. And he owns up to a lot of those inaccuracies and discrepancies, and kind of explains why. But he talks about his research and all his time in it too. And I believe the name of the podcast, I don't have it in show notes. Let me pull it up on my phone real quick. The name of the shotcast is the Chernobyl Podcast. Who would have guessed?
Wow. Clever.
Yeah, also 5 episodes. Basically one podcast episode per episode. So it was 5 episodes. Okay. I don't know why I said 6. So there you go. Watch it.
I will. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I could just feel the passion about the topic coming out of you. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and if you ever want me to revisit some of my other weird passions that I have books about, I've got a really good one for maybe next time too.
Add it to the list.
I will. It is probably one of the craziest stories of the Cold War.
I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about it.
Everybody's just like, talk about multi-factor authentication or SQL. I don't want to talk about those things.
Stay on brand.
Yeah.
I follow you for tech.
Yeah. Listen, if you're not following me for the dog pictures in the posting, you're doing it wrong. I said another cuss.
That's okay. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I really like. Honestly, the honk that you used in episode 1, I feel should be pretty standard. It was really good.
To be honest, so it took me a very long time to find that piece of audio. And then, so I have absolutely no experience editing audio at all. I had a vague notion of how it was done because I listened to a lot of podcasts. I probably spent 15 to 20 minutes on that 5 seconds of audio that first time.
So,
okay. Even then, I'm not happy with how it came out. So I'm going to take another shot at it.
I thought it was 100% perfect.
Yeah.
Question though, where did you go for the audio?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I have no idea. I was just looking for some Creative Commons short audio clips. I listened to a bunch of various synthesizer noises, some bleeps and bloops. Then I found the honk. I'm like, I like the honk. So,
well, wait a minute. I had just assumed that you were going to go the GarageBand route and use like a sound effects library from GarageBand. Or am I being naive?
So I thought about using GarageBand, but because of podcasts, I heard about this podcast editor that is iOS based, great on the iPad, called Ferrite. I'll put a link in the show notes. And it's nice because it's really just designed for simple audio editing. It's got enough, it's inexpensive, it's got enough effects built in, auto levelers, stuff like that. So I use that. And plus, it also gave me an excuse to use my Apple Pencil that I bought and never use. So
you edited this whole. You've been editing this show solely on an iPad?
Yes, both episodes.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's actually a relatively easy editor. It's just you kind of have to, being that there's no like mouse support or menu bar, you kind of have to learn all the weird gestures. Like tap with 2 fingers and slide and do all this stuff. But I'm getting pretty good. Except that I almost really messed up the last episode. I thought everything was good. I exported it. And I kind of just give it a spot check in a few places to make sure that like I didn't mess up, that the chapter markers are in the right place, that the audio levels sound good. And like I had accidentally like slid pieces of audio over top of each other, and there was crossfades and cross-talking. It's like, oh, good thing I listened to this. Because my fat finger just slid across the screen. Yeah.
It's a very avant-garde podcast. I'm surprised they got away with it.
Yeah. I'm like, is this a statement? Yeah.
Oh man.
But I'm gonna give the honk another try. Here we go.
Yeah, no, I've been very impressed with our quality. Your quality. It's obvious that our investment in good microphones has paid off.
Yeah, it helps. And honestly, I don't do a lot of editing. I just like remove some silence. When we really mess things up, I'll cut it out. There's a lot of crosstalk. I'll try to fix it, but most of the time it's just syncing up the 2 tracks and letting it go.
Yeah, so for those of you that have never recorded like a multi-person podcast, so basically Paul and I both run different recording software on our local machines, and then through the power of the cloud, we share these files that we export, and then Paul kind of lays them on top of each other.
Yep.
And we make a podcast baby.
Yeah, I believe it's called a double ender. That's the technical term. Yeah, fancy.
Double ender.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and write that down. I feel like there might be a show title in there.
I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong. Hold on. Yeah, a double ender. Yeah, it almost sounds kind of dirty.
Somebody came up with that term with a straight face.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So I've rambled about Chernobyl for, I almost said Chipotle. I've rambled about
different things.
Chernobyl. Yeah. I've rambled about Chernobyl for a good 30 minutes. Where do we want to go next here?
Oh, I mean, there's the big topic of board game fluff and things about board gaming that aren't board games, but I don't know. We've been talking for what, like 35 minutes?
I've got 40. I've got 40 by my clock.
40.
I went real long. So all right.
No, you're good.
I'm gonna pick the topic for you.
Okay.
So you have in here, you want to talk about Roblox.
Oh, yeah. So
are you in a place where you want to do that, or?
Yeah. So it's going to be a short topic. So if you don't know, there's this video game called Roblox, and it's really 2-sided. There are people that play the game, and they also have a set of creation tools where you can create your own games. That's all it is people just making these worlds, these little mini games. Some of them are very elaborate, and kids love it. They just go and play. My son has many friends. They kind of almost hang out with each other in Roblox. My daughter also plays. There's games that kind of look like MMOs where there's knights and swords and they're fighting monsters. I think my daughter's favorite game is called Adoption Simulator, where you adopt and make a family. I don't know. I don't understand. So first of all, the graphics are horrible. They're just not good graphics. The physics look all funky. But I guess the tools for making the games is easy. So I don't know if you remember back in the day when YouTube had a rampant copyright problem. Because people would just put up anything on YouTube and it would just stay there forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Roblox is exactly like that. I can't tell you how many times I've walked by and I hear music playing from my son's computer. I'm like, I must be listening to Spotify. Nope. People have just uploaded entire tracks of, music as their background music for Roblox. There are blatant ripoffs of just about every game you can think of, down to the names, stealing art assets from the games. It is just ridiculous how much copyright infringement, just outright theft happens on Roblox, and nobody seems to care one bit. It's truly fascinating.
So let me tell you what I know about Roblox, which is not to say very much. I have seen a few Let's Players on YouTube kind of satirize playing this game. And I have seen this phenomenon you described very clearly, but I think there's one thing you may have left out here that I think is really key to this discussion, is that while many of the experiences that you're describing are free to play, some are not.
Oh, yes, they're all around making money. So, for example, my son found a Fortnite clone the other day, and I was kind of just watching him out of the corner of my eye. He's like, I bet you this is just a scam. So he runs around and he sees a car. And he goes to the car and activates it. It's like, oh, if you want to use this car, you have to buy $5 of Roblox funny money to use the car. And he ran around and he did something else. And oh, nope, you have to pay money to do that too. And honestly, and my son, no, he doesn't necessarily get an allowance. Sometimes he just asks for me to buy him fake currency in games. And he spent a lot of money on Roblox. It's kind of like a fashion thing, staying up. It's less today about what shoes you wear to school, but it's you're using the default skin in Roblox or Fortnite. That's kind of where fashion and bullying are in school. So he likes to buy Roblox, Robux. That's the name of their currency. Robux. Yeah, it's very fancy. Yeah. But I was just looking, they have 90 million monthly active users.
And see, you're telling me that, and I don't believe it. And I'm sure you're telling me the truth, which is shocking to me, because
yes.
I assumed that most kids, right? And I don't have kids, but most kids are on the Fortnite / Minecraft wagon, right? Because I know a lot of people who have kids, in elementary and middle school, play Fortnite more than anything else. I'm actually surprised that there are still so many active players on Roblox.
Yeah, so Fortnite is big in my son. He'll be turning 13 here shortly. He plays a lot of Fortnite, but he probably plays just as much, if not more, of Roblox. And honestly, there are some really good games out there. I think the one he plays a lot is called Dungeon Quest. I'm going to make sure that I'm saying that right. Yeah, Dungeon Quest is one of the bigger ones. It looks like a fully, someone spent a lot of time and a lot of love making basically a multiplayer MMO inside of Roblox. That's hard to say. And it's fascinating. But then there's also games he plays that just look I'll just, find this game from 10 years ago, dump all the art assets, and boom, here we go. Game.
Yeah. Yeah, so if I had to describe Roblox from my very limited experience with it, is that it kind of takes the essentials of Minecraft, where you have kind of a creationist, or creation, not creationist is not the right word, but a kind of a creation canvas where you can build the things you want to build. And there's also kind of some, and I don't know how robust this is, but there's also some like development type tools to where you can animate things on timers and react things to switches. Oh yeah,
it's very robust. Things. Yeah,
it is. So what you're describing then is that when you log into Roblox, you just don't log into the game. You log into the Roblox website. You choose the quote unquote the Roblox experience or game you want to play, which then launches a game inside of that set of tools that somebody created.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's all I know about Roblox.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of funny because, especially for kids, like things like Roblox and Fortnite, in a lot of cases, it's less about the game, and it's more of a place where they hang out with their friends. Yeah, especially with things like Roblox, where it's just like a big sandbox, lots of small little games, and Fortnite recently introduced a bunch of like creation tools and like playgrounds. So like, yeah, while they do play the game, it's like, it's what they do to hang out with each other. It's almost like a social network in that way. Like, it's just where they go to hang out with their friends. Yeah. But Roblox is, at some point, some lawyers are going to catch whiff of that, and they're going to have all kinds of copyright problems. Woo, buddy.
Yeah, but Roblox isn't exactly a new game.
It's not.
It's been out for a long time, and as far as I know, that has been a problem since day one.
Yeah, and it's not gotten better.
Right. So you have to want, like, is it just not worth the effort to, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
Man, yeah, how deep does this conspiracy go?
Yeah, I mean, somebody's making money off of this stuff, whether it's the content creators or the people that run the servers, or, and there's clearly a lot of use of just blatantly copyrighted materials in this stuff. Like, I remember, 10, 15 years ago when YouTube had the same stuff, and now YouTube polices themselves, and if you upload a video with a song in the background, you get a strike. Like, I don't see that here, and at some point I think they're going to have to start, they're going to get sued, they're going to lose a lot of money, and then it will become a priority.
I don't,
or not,
and I don't know if it will, because it's gone on for so long that you have to kind of go after the individual creators of the, I don't think you can go after Roblox itself, right? Because
you probably can get them to take it down, right?
Yeah. Right. I think that's the best you could hope for, because it's just like YouTube, where if I upload a full copy of the movie The Equalizer 2, the fine folks that made that movie aren't going to sue YouTube. They're going to call YouTube and say, get that off the platform. Right. And YouTube's going to be the one that disciplines me, not them.
That's a good point.
Right. So
yeah, maybe the individual game creators just aren't making enough money, so it's not worth it yet.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I'm actually, the bigger shock for me is that there's just that many people that play that game, because every time I have seen it played, it does not look fun.
No,
it might not be for me. It might not be for
Yeah, we're the olds.
Right. So I'm willing to admit that. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm not the target demographic, but I just know that there were a lot of games that a lot of my friends played that, at least when this was more late high school, college is when all of the games that I played really took off, because first of all, I didn't have that many friends when I was that age, and second of all, the friends that I did have didn't play computer games. So my experiences were just randos online when I did play a game. But yeah, there were games that a good example, right? There were lots of muds and muxes in my previous life, right?
Ditto.
Yeah. And they were all not created equally. I don't care how many people played them. No. If I couldn't get past the interface, or I couldn't get the keystrokes down in a memorable fashion, I just didn't play it.
Yeah, actually, there was a World Moo, which is kind of like an offshoot of the muds. That's where I really got my first real taste of making real things with programming. It was
Yeah.
Future topic.
Kids today don't know the struggle.
Yeah, all text all the time.
Yep. ASCII art if you're lucky.
That exactly.
Oh man. All right. Let's see. One more topic for today here. You want to go into board game fluff? I think that's probably a good one to end on.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously we're not talking about board games in particular. We're talking about all the stuff that kind of goes around board games. The other half of the hobby. The secret dark half of the hobby.
Yeah. So, and this doesn't apply to board games, by the way, because I'll use the inevitable car analogy here. Let's say you buy a car you really, really enjoy. Sooner or later, you realize that you don't want to keep buying cars if you're a car guy or a car person.
Right.
You want to make the cars you have better. And board games fall into that same kind of thing, right? If you're really into a hobby, sooner or later, you're going to get enough of that thing to where acquiring more of that thing isn't necessarily the goal anymore. It's making the things you have better. And board games definitely can enable you to do this because in addition to owning a game, there are so many things you can do to the individual games themselves that either enhance the experience of playing them or just make them better games in some particular case.
That's right.
I think that this discussion sort of begins with what I consider to be almost essential to some modern board games, and that is a good board game organizer.
I agree. I love these things.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you buy most modern board games, when you first crack the box open, you're going to be greeted with a lot of plastic baggies with the individual components in them.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, and you're also going to have lots of sheets of cardboard that you have to punch components out of.
Right.
And most board games will give you a decent-ish number of empty plastic little Ziploc baggies to store the components in that you're punching out. So after you open the box...
or a piece of molded, injected plastic to kind of sort things and put stuff into. Yeah.
Sure. But that I would consider that to be the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. So I have a complaint. Okay. I have to get this off my chest right now. So I got a new board game delivered today. It's Fantasy Flight's new game, Star Wars Outer Rim. I have no idea if it's good or not. I saw a deal on Mass Drop. I ordered it. So I opened the box. And of course, there's a big thing of punch board. There's a bunch of cards. There's some wonderfully beautiful custom tableaus. It's very nice. The box is horrific. There are no baggies. There is no plastic tray. There's just enough cardboard in there to keep stuff from moving during shipment. There is no organization at all. There's probably 20 different types of cardboard that I need to punch out and keep separate. No bags, no nothing. Just a big empty spot to have everything mixed together.
If I had to give a wag of the finger to any company making board games today that totally messes that up, it's going to be Fantasy Flight. They give you
nothing.
They give you nothing. It doesn't really matter what game too. So there's two ends of the spectrum there. And while I feel your pain for the new Star Wars Outer Rim game, as somebody who owns both editions of Mansions of Madness, I laugh in your general direction because that game is chock full of minis and cardboard counters and dice and tokens and everything, and they give you exactly 0 baggies for components. The only baggies they give you, or the only storage they give you, is they give you some bags that some cards and some of the player tableaus come in. The rest of the box is this weird setup where it's almost like, imagine a square that's maybe 4 inches deep. Okay, so the bottom of the box. Okay, so square, 4 inches deep. Most Fantasy Flight games come with a piece of cardboard that goes inside of there and basically divides the box into 3 sections. So there's like the middle section where they expect you to store all the cards and all kind of the stuff that can fit in that general space. And then the left and right side of that center channel are little pieces of cardboard that kind of fold up. And you're supposed to store everything else in there. And those little flaps act as a lid. So they kind of fall, like they kind of just move around in there loose. But it's okay because they have kind of a lid. Yeah, Fantasy Flight is one of the worst offenders of this.
Yeah, I was very disappointed. In fact, I didn't even punch out any of the cardboard. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And I just closed it up and let it be.
But that's a good place to start because it's situations like that, and because we live in a capitalist society, somebody sees this and says, hey, I could probably make a lot of money if I develop a solution to gamers who buy games like this to make their life easier. And boy, oh boy, do they.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll put a link in show notes, but kind of the go-to example of this is there is a company called The Broken Token. And what they have carved out for themselves is somebody bought a bunch of industrial CNC machines. And what they do is they take wood, very, very thin pieces of wood. They use their industrial CNC machines to basically cut out pieces that you will assemble that then are designed to be crafted into what amounts to card holders and component holders and lids and
trays, boxes.
Some are designed to sit in the box permanently, and then some have components that can come out of the box and go back in the box and fit in there very neatly.
Yep.
It can not only can it facilitate keeping your box organized, it also can speed up all of the setup and tear down for certain games.
Yeah, I always point to Castles of Mad King Ludwig for this example. There's lots of different pieces, all different shapes and sizes. You have to sort them all out. And the Broken Token Organizer gives you basically places to put all these. And it really cuts the setup and tear down of the game by like 10, 15 minutes sometimes.
Yes. So that alone for your time and your sanity is awesome. But a lot of them also have, like I said, like the trays that can come out and go back in the box. And then it just kind of keeps everything nice and organized. I think that for all the games that I can have a Broken Token Organizer, I think I do have one, with maybe one or two exceptions of games that I just don't play very much.
Yeah.
They are godsends. Now, when you buy them, and you can buy them at your friendly local game store, or FLGS as we say in the biz, or you can get them online. They ship to you unassembled, so you're going to spend a little bit of time punching out these little pieces of wood carefully because you don't want them to break.
Right.
And then you're going to assemble them. They recommend using a little bit of wood glue on some of the larger forms. I can't recommend that little life hack enough because it'll keep everything nice and steady.
Right.
But I have them for some of my smaller games. I have them for a game like Gloomhaven, which is massive. I don't know how. Full disclosure, I don't know how you would play Gloomhaven without a game organizer. You would spend 2 hours setting that game up.
Yeah, and in those cases, like there's games like Gloomhaven. I just bought the one for Dinosaur Island. They actually partner with the game publishers and game designers, and they use like the artwork and the imagery like along with it, so you get really like all the iconography on the trays and the storage match, and it's really, really nice. They're really well done. I love them. And sometimes it's not just about organization too. They can really enhance the playing of the game. A good example of that is the organizer that they make for Terraforming Mars, because not only do they give you a really nice box organizer, as good of a game as Terraforming Mars is, you're basically trusting that the stuff you place on your player board is exactly where you left it. And what the Broken Token does is, in addition to giving you a box organizer, they also give you trays that are notched, so you can set the cubes in a particular place, and if you accidentally bump them, you won't forget how much money you have. Right.
So
they improve the game.
Yeah, they absolutely improve the game too. Now, a lot of times you will spend sometimes just as much on the organizer as you did the game. So that
if not a little bit more, yeah.
If not, sometimes a little bit more. So your investment has basically doubled in these particular games. But that's why they're fluff. Do you need them? No. But if you're at a place where you own, a decent collection of games and your focus is less on acquiring new games and enjoying the games you have, I would say that by far this is a kind of a necessity.
And like, for example, they also sell like some component replacements if you want nicer pieces, some actual like metal coins, again, for Dinosaur Island, which is basically like running Jurassic Park, the game. So I bought the game well after its Kickstarter, so all of my dinosaurs were plain bright pink Triceratops. And when they came out with their organizer, they said, hey, we have custom dinosaur meeples, and they're all the right shapes and the right colors. And I bought all of them because it makes the game nicer, and I enjoy them. Yeah. So not only do they do organizers, they do accessories.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in addition to that, right, the next thing that I want to bring up on here is if you truly enjoy the board gaming hobby, it's a pretty short walk to then buying a 3D printer.
I'm listening.
Okay, so I purchased a 3D printer last summer-ish. No, it was last fall. I bought a 3D printer last fall with the explicit intent of using it for basically two purposes. One, for those of you that follow me on Twitter or follow me on my blog and stuff, I'm a little bit of a maker. So I mess a lot with little electronic projects that I work on, and Raspberry Pis and IoT stuff. So I bought it to build things like cases or wire harnesses or, whatever would tickle my fancy that I wanted to basically print. I also bought it to make negatives that I could then cast out of resin, which after messing around with resin, I don't want to do anymore because I'm not artistic and patient enough to work with it. But the other thing I bought it for was to print pieces for board games. Because you don't always have the luxury of a company like a Broken Token or some other places making replacement pieces that in some cases are better than what came in the base game. I have printed some things for my games, and I would say that probably the best example that I can give of stuff that I have 3D printed for a board game is the replacement pieces that I printed for my copy of Power Grid. My copy of Power Grid, which is a fantastic game, has seen considerable use. I have lost to John Kruger and Matt Keller more times than I care to admit. But, games develop a little bit of wear and tear, usually in the cardboard side of the equation. But, listen, you can lose components. And in a game like Power Grid, where the exact number of components is critical to the game because they are limited, you need to have each piece. Now, being very anal retentive about my games, I have not lost pieces, but Power Grid was the first game that I really sat down and did some serious 3D printing to make the game a little more enjoyable. And here's what I did. The first thing I did was the game can play up to 6 people, and each player has a baggie of their colors of their towns that they control. So the first thing I did is I printed 6 boxes in each player color to house the components. They're little tiny boxes, and all they do is hold the little houses that the players use to basically mark their territory in the game.
Nice.
I downloaded those models from Thingiverse, and as part of the package, they also had kind of basically a 3D printed arm that sits in the box in such a way that when it sits inside the box, divides the box into sections, and when all 6 of these boxes are placed in their particular section, they don't move. Now, the lids can come off, right, because they don't have any kind of latches or anything. But they do sit in there nice, and I think the conceit is that you put the board on top of it to kind of lock it all into place. But if you were to drop your box upside down, it's all going to fall out. The next thing I printed is, in that game, there are 4 types of resources. They get used throughout the game. There's coal, oil, garbage, and nuclear. So what I did is I printed in different colors different little models that represent the different resources. The base game comes with wooden pieces that represent the different things. Either like coal is a little brown square, oil's a little wooden like tube, trash is a yellow kind of hexagon shape, and then nuclear is a bigger red hexagon shape. So what I printed was kind of more true to life copies of the resources, so like a pile of coal or an oil drum or a trash can or a radiation symbol in the same colors that are used in the game, so you can quickly see visually what they are when they're on the market or on somebody's cards. But I just kind of printed that out and made that a little easier to use. And then I printed a box to house all of that, because typically what happens in a game of Power Grid is if you don't have a way to have all that stuff off to the side, there's just a pile of resources there and you have to sift through it. Having something to kind of use throughout the game is like a tray as well, kind of facilitates speeding that game up a little bit too. So printing pieces for the games was something that I did a lot. I printed quite a few pieces for Mansions of Madness as well, like doors and stuff, so you didn't have to rely on the little pieces of cardboard to know where a door was on the board. So having a 3D printer has also helped kind of improve the board gaming experience for me as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I could listen to you talk about custom board game boxes all day.
Yeah. Now the next one we have on the list I'm gonna let you talk about, because I think you made this investment, whereas I have not.
Dice?
Yeah. Didn't you have some custom dice made? Or you have metal dice? Or
I have gotten some metal dice as a gift. I know I'm not super big on buying custom dice. But I recently did play a game of Cthulhu Wars, which is a area control game with big stompy monsters. And the person who had invested in that had bought custom dice, because the game's all about like, if you roll a 6, you get a kill, and a 4 and a 5 is a pain, and the rest are garbage. And he bought custom dice for all the different factions and all the different colors, and they didn't have numbers on them. And they were really, really nice. They really added to the flavor of the game. But I also enjoy games. Again, well, I'll point at Fantasy Flight for this. They love to do it. They love to print custom dice with symbols instead of numbers that match the game just perfectly. Yeah, so I'm not super, like, I don't go out of my way, but I do appreciate a nice custom dice. Yeah.
Yeah, and there are companies, one of which we'll talk about in a minute here, that if you wanted some like personalized, really well-crafted dice out of a lot of different materials, right? You can get them crafted out of metal, which I think is crazy, because that is just scratching any surface that you're ever going to use it.
Yeah, well,
on.
The first thing I got a nice set of metal dice for a Christmas gift a couple years ago. And the first thing I realized is, wow, I don't have any dice trays, because I can't use these anywhere without destroying a table. So I have a really nice collapsible dice tray, which is nice. I can just throw it in my bag, or my nerd box when I go out, because I bring my own dice tray. That's how I roll.
Literally.
Yeah. But
you can get them made out of almost any material.
Oh, there's,
right? I think,
yeah, they do wood now. Yeah, I've seen some stone dice in the past.
I've seen stone, I've seen metal, I've seen wood, I've seen acrylic.
Right.
You can get pretty crazy. You can basically pick the colors and the dye. If you don't want traditional numbers on your dice, you can get Klingon if you're into that type of thing. Like you can get pretty crazy if you're the type of player who plays a lot of games with a lot of dice. Like specifically, probably the target market here are tabletop gamers playing some sort of role-playing game where you need multiple dice, usually many different shapes, right? 8s, 6s, 20s, 10s, whatever. That's the market for you. 4s, yeah.
Okay, so I did a quick internet search. I had to know there is a company that takes alligator jawbones, carves them down, coats them in acrylic, and sells them.
Huh.
So you can have bone dice.
I think that I have a powder supplement that might also use alligator skulls that I grind up and then snort to be more me.
You got to have the right powders.
Yep. And now to kind of cap all this off, kind of the ultimate in terms of if you play a lot of board games or you host having people play games in your general vicinity, kind of the mountaintop is getting or creating your own custom board gaming table. I have some experience here. Generally, okay, so these all kind of follow a very similar pattern. The idea is that imagine a dining room table or a kitchen table, usually rectangular in shape. If you've played board games at somebody's house, chances are you've played on a big dining room table or a big kitchen table. But board game tables are marketed as regular tables that you can use for everyday things. But a lot of them have either removable covers or removable planks. And the best way to imagine this, and we'll make sure we put a couple of links in the show notes, is it's a regular table that the middle of it, with the exception of maybe a 1 or 1 1/4 inch rail around the outside, is recessed, usually about 3 inches. And inside of there, instead of being hardwood or plastic or something, usually there is some sort of fabric in place. The two major ones that people usually use are a velvet, so typical like velvet playing card surface, or a synthetic fabric known as speed cloth. And if you've ever been to Vegas in the last 10 or 15 years, you've probably played cards on a speed cloth surface. They both have pros and cons. People tend to favor the speed cloth option just because it is more durable, it doesn't collect as much dust, and it's water resistant. So if you accidentally spill something on it, something beads. People buy these, and then you can basically pimp them out with all sorts of different options. You can get cup holders, you can get dice trays, you can get drawers, you can get GM screens, you can get LED lighting, you can get your custom name printed on the table. And typically, if you go this route, it's because you do enjoy playing a lot of games or you like hosting people to play games. And there's basically a couple different ways you can acquire a custom board game table. The first is that you can go on the internet, usually on Reddit, and you can find people that have built their own board game tables. And if you're the woodworky type, you're the creative type, and you have the time that you want to invest in this, you can build exactly what you want to the specifications you want, and it can actually be pretty economical as far as a piece of furniture goes. I think I've seen some people build them for as little as $400 or as much as $1,600. And usually what it comes down to is that a lot of people who are building their own board game tables, what they do is in that kind of 3-inch recessed area where they play the game, a lot of times they will make an insert that goes in there when you're playing a game of, I don't know, cards. But that insert can lift out, and usually underneath of that, they have taken like an LCD or OLED TV and laid it flat inside of the table. And if you're hosting a game of Dungeons and Dragons or something where there's a map, a lot of times that TV is your map.
Yeah, a virtual tabletop. Yeah,
a virtual tabletop, right? You can get a cheap 36-inch LED TV and just drop it in there. right? And just kind of have it, projection side up. And then that becomes your map. And maybe you put a little thin layer of plexiglass. So you're not putting models or anything directly on it or rolling metal dice on it. But I've seen a lot of good examples of people that have built their own tables. Now, the flip side of that is if you have more money than time, there are companies that will happily take your money and build you a table to your, specifications with the options you want. And you can't have that discussion without talking about a company known as Wormwood. And Wormwood is probably what I would consider to be kind of the Cadillac of custom board game tables. And they have a price tag that sort of reflects that. And they pride themselves not only on their craftsmanship, which, having seen the tables at conventions, is really, really impressive. I mean, their tables are just as nice as any dining room or kitchen table that you would buy at any high-end furniture store. They pride themselves not only on their craftsmanship, but they also have a lot of different options in terms of the type of wood that you want. So, it's not like you're locked into just using pine or maybe red oak. If you want like some sort of exotic wood used in your board game table, you can get it, but don't be surprised if it costs an extra $10,000.
And they sell matching chairs as well, too, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, you can also get chairs made from the same material.
Yeah.
One of the things that they're really known for is what they call their game vault system. So in my previous description of how that playing surface is recessed 3 areas, one of their options you can get on their tables is basically a metal crank that can raise and lower that. So the idea is that if you're playing a game, you would raise that up to regular table playing surface area, which I guess you could do. And when you're done, you crank it back down and then put your topper back on the table. Your game is still set up underneath of that topper, and then you use the table for hosting dinner or even, making dinner or eating dinner or whatever else you use kitchen and dining room tables for. As far as workmanship and reputation and overall quality, I think that they are probably the best ones out there. And the thing about ordering a table custom built from a company like Wormwood is it doesn't happen overnight. Okay? When you're working with a company like this, typically they ask you for a deposit to say that you're serious, and then that just secures your place in line. I am in the market for a board game table, and they were the first people that I reached out to. And they said, listen, we can't even start building your table until October. And even then, it's going to take 2 or 3 months to get. I wouldn't get it till like January. And as nice as it would be to have a Wormwood gaming table, I don't want to necessarily wait that long.
And so, they are on the high end of price as well.
Yes, I would say that they are on the high end. There are other companies not based in the United States that probably build tables just as nice. But again, they're not based in the U.S. There's significant lead time. There's the whole concept of your shipping costs, your table going through customs. Like, never mind. Now, there are other domestic companies that maybe you wouldn't put on that tier of a Wormwood. I found one that took my order. It's going to take about 3 months. And they had an awesome online configurator. They let me pick the options I want. They're going to build my table. Their process is very similar to Wormwood's, where I put down a deposit. And I couldn't make up my mind on the type of fabric I wanted or the color of the wood I wanted. So they basically said, hey, once you put your deposit down, we'll ship you a bunch of samples and you tell us which one you want. And those just showed up yesterday. So
nice.
I'm working through my final selection right now. I have to make up my mind by July 1st. My table's scheduled to be constructed right around July 15th. It's going to take about a month to make, and then they're going to ship it to me. So I'm really excited to get it. It's really going to tie the giant gaping hole in my home office together, because I turned my living room into my home office / game room. So it's really going to tie the room together. But the point is, once you play enough board games, a lot of them tend to run together. And it becomes less about the game you're playing and the experience of playing the games, which is why stuff like this, like the custom, 3D printed stuff or the board game organizers or a board game table, end up being more important than the actual game you're playing itself.
Yeah, it's about removing the obstacles to playing the game, so you can just all that stuff just fades away, and you can just spend time with your friends and your family, having a good time. Like they're little enjoyment engines, right? So, yeah, I get it. Like, I would love to have a board game table, but I don't host enough board game nights at my house, mostly because I live in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, I can't wait to see yours and sit down and play some games at it.
Well, and it's also, how do I say this without sounding a little wistful? It's also a way to stay in touch with people I care about, right? Like,
Right.
I used to work with a lot of people who are passionate about board games. I'm willing to make this investment not only as a piece of furniture in my home, but also as a place where people that I care about can come play games. And the idea is that if I'm going to invest this money, I'm going to host a lot of board game nights, and I'm going to see these people more. So in a way, it helps me kind of justify that cost.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about keeping in touch with friends and having a good time with people, right? Like, there's a reason that most board games require at least 2 people to play, right?
As somebody who has tried to play solo variants of games, my wife has walked down and seen me done it, and she just looks at me and says, "You are very, very sad."
Yeah, playing by yourself.
Yeah. And I'm like, "Nuh-uh, I got my imaginary friend here."
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll say Rocky's playing.
Nice.
Sometimes he'll like just sit there and watch me roll dice and wonder what I'm doing. Oh, man. All right. I feel like that's a pretty good place to stop. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that's a good episode.
That's pretty decent. Yeah, so this is our second recording episode of the week because I was late last week and we made up for it early this week, and we're going to crank this one out.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this has been another episode of Doing Their Best. I'm sure they're doing their best.
Yep.
Paul, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I am on Twitter at Paul Baylor. That's BAHLER. And where can they find you, Drew?
Also on the Twitters at Pittsfurg, PITTFURG. We also have the website where you can see all the links from the show notes that we talk about, which is at doingtheirbest.com.
Yep. And we're on Twitter at Doing Best Pod.
Yep. And if you're listening to this and you're enjoying the podcast, we thank you. We'd also like to get some actual real listener feedback. So Don't be shy about, mashing that, like button or, the stars or whatever platform you're listening on. And also sending us a note to telling us what you like to hear more of or less of. And we'll probably just ignore you. But at the same time, it would be nice to hear from you.
Absolutely. If you have topic ideas or suggestions, let us know. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and call this another show, and we will see you all hopefully next week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
See you, everybody.